Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon from everywhere you are. I'm so happy to be here with another Microsoft Zero to Hero session. Before I start the session, let me share some information with you. Let me share my slide. Yes, today we have Angeliki to present about the Power Automate and Power Page. And actually, I want to share some information about the community, Microsoft Learn community. As you know, we are part of Microsoft Learn community. Microsoft Learn community, there are a lot of learning content about many topics, Microsoft technology. You can filter based off your career path, certificate. Actually, you can join from aka.ms Microsoft Learn community. This is our August calendar, Microsoft Zero to Hero session calendar. All previous session uploaded on our YouTube channel. You can watch, and we have a lot of session in the end of the August month. And actually, I wanna introduce a new program, Microsoft Next Gen Heroes. In the 22nd of August, we have introduction session with our student ambassador. I will share registration link in the chat. You can join and see a lot of news about the new program, Microsoft Next Gen Heroes. And the last slide is our code of conduct. Be aware of others, be friendly and passionate, be welcoming and respectful, be open to all questions and viewpoints, be understanding of difference, and finally be kind and consider to others in the chat, in the question, in the voice. And the time is to add Angeliki to a stage. Hello, Angeliki.
Hi, Mohsen, and hi, everyone.
Hi, how are you? Everything is fine?
Doing very well. I'm very excited to be here today. First time.
Yeah, nice, great. And actually, the topic is very interesting. And I think that all of the participants are waiting to share your information and know about that this topic, Power Automate and Power Page. And stage yours, you can share your slide and start your presentation. Good luck.
Sounds good. Thank you. So let me know if you can see this in full screen.
Yes, just for your information, other participants, you can ask your question in the chat. End of the session, Angelika will answer your question. Actually, we have a voucher, 50% discount voucher for Microsoft Fundamental and Advanced Certification. We will select the best question end of the session as a winner for this voucher. Yeah, go ahead, Angelika.
Great. Well, once again, hello everyone. My name is Angeliki Patsiavou, and today we'll be going through together a marvelous kind of way to set up a very simple kind of dynamic checklist within either your Dynamics 365 app or your general model-driven app using Power Automate, and also how this will surface within Power Pages as well. So a little bit about me. As I mentioned, my name is Angeliki Patsiavou. And as you may notice from the accent, there's a few things going on. I've been living in the UK for the last decade now, actually, so it's pretty much home, but I'm originally Greek-Italian, so a little bit of a UN situation. I work for Avanade within the business applications practice here in the UK, and I'm also an MVP within this space as well. I've been an MVP for second year in a row now, super excited and proud, as well as a ProSite certified practitioner, because in my previous career, in a way, I was a change manager. So I'm a little bit of a hybrid in that sense. I started my career in CRM, since I joined the UK, actually. And since then, it became my passion, my love language in a way. Started off in digital marketing, then into change management, and eventually into functional consulting and architecture. So ultimately, I live and breathe CRM, but I also love the Power Platform and all the opportunities it brings. Now, I'm also very passionate about the community. This is what brings me here today, to be with you all. And in that sense, I've coined the term of a human evangelist. You may wonder, what is a human evangelist? I've only heard of tech evangelists or developer advocates. Well, this is a term with which I'm referring to advocating for the human impact that all the fantastic tech has and all the potential that it has for change. To that effect, I'm quite a frequent speaker within the community as well as a blogger as well. My blog is empoweredhumans.net, obviously powered capital letters to talk about Power Platform, but also the power that our tech has to have that impact. So please do feel free to reach out. You have socials here as well, and you'll see it at the end of the session as well. So that's enough about the intro. Let's get straight into the good stuff. And I want to start with why. Now, this is a fantastic phrase as well as a book from Simon Sinek, in case anyone has read it already. And this is about looking at the core of the problem or at the core of the inspiration that led to this session. So why are we even talking about checklists? Is this relevant? How is it applicable to our use cases and our data?
Sorry to interrupt you, Angelika. I think we have another screen from you. It's not full screen share. We will see your PowerPoint.
Okay. I am sharing the PowerPoint, but I can try again. One moment.
Yeah, thank you.
Did it just stop sharing, or has this been for a while? So, I've just shared again and it's in full screen. Are you able to see it?
I see, but it's a PowerPoint and it's not presentation mode.
Oh, okay. Let's try again. It happens sometimes, right?
Yeah, okay, no worry.
So, would it be more sensible to upload a file? Because I'm not sure where this is lagging. Or should I try to share my screen again? Because I'm not sure where the issue is.
I think you need to presentation mode. Start the presentation mode, your PowerPoint.
And then share my screen? Yeah. Okay, yeah, we can do that. Right. So. How about now? Are we in full screen?
Yeah, exactly. Is it okay?
Beautiful. Okay, great.
Thank you.
Let's start again. No worries, no worries. It happens, right? It happens.
Yeah.
Okay, so as I was saying, it's very important to understand why we're even focusing on this, but also to understand how this can relate to our own applications. So why checklists? First of all, let's think about the different industries that we work with and the different use cases that we end up finding. So I was inspired by different kinds of use cases where you have you've started with a paper form that has multiple kinds. You have a checklist, you have multiple lines, and you're going around managing all sorts of data points for each line. And what do I mean in practice? Think of a supermarket, for example, or any kind of retail space where you're doing shop floor inspections. You have your checklist, it's usually a paper form, and you're going around checking simultaneously, let's say your stock numbers, general availability, maybe you have other data points as well. And ultimately, as you're performing your checks, this is all happening in tandem. Sometimes it's a little bit chaotic because you're going back and forth. So it's really helpful to have this all in one go. So Another use case is within the healthcare space. So for example, you have, let's say, a nurse or a doctor doing their rounds, and they're looking for different patients and different checks throughout the day. So again, they're using a single paper form, and they want to be able to quickly note down a few things for each patient, which would represent a row and so forth. Similar, you can think of the hospitality space and how you're doing hygiene checks. So ultimately, there's a lot of industry use cases where you want to digitize a paper form and bring this to life in a way that is still accessible to the user. So with that in mind, of course, we love automation, we love out-of-the-box features, but we also need to be taking into account that sometimes complete automation over this and using some really cool out-of-the-box features might not be realistic. So what do I mean by that? Sometimes it's too costly to completely automate these checks. Sometimes it's not even feasible because you may not have the right resources for it. And sometimes, similar to the use cases I mentioned, you need some kind of human verification and validation. So for example, yes, you could in theory use some automation and AI to do some of your shop floor checks, but ultimately the decision needs to be made, a discretionary decision about buying new stock or reverting to a secondary option, or especially in the topic of healthcare, deciding on the next step for a patient treatment, you still want that human validation. And then you may also wonder, we are talking in the context of Dynamics 365 and the beautiful world of model-driven apps and now out-of-the-box features. So why not consider business process flows, for example, and automate these checks in that kind of standardized format? Well, to begin with, let's think technically here. We are looking at almost a very complex kind of nested build. And well, we all love the movie Inception and how we can realize it through loads of different kind of subgrids. Ultimately, it might not be realistic and sustainable to create this. At the same time, we need to think about formatting. As I mentioned here, we are talking about end users that are performing some critical processes. Sometimes they are completely under pressure, whether it's time pressure, business pressure, whatever kind of pressure. And we need to create a format that is completely accessible to them, especially if we're migrating them from a paper process that they're used to a completely digitized process. Now, of course, we are thinking about the natural resistance to change as humans. This is a perfectly expected behavior. So we need to think about an alternative to the traditional automations or business features that we know and love from our applications in our Maker portal. So this is the business case, essentially. So let's talk about specifics, and let's talk about why the Avengers were even a scenario in this. So in this particular scenario, we have Tony, also known as an Iron Man, who leads the Avengers. And every time there's a new battle that he needs to lead, there's multiple kinds of steps that need to be taken in order to prepare for battle, different kinds of checks, if you may. So essentially, he wants to standardize the process. He wants to bring everything into the lovely world of Dynamics 365 and have an app that will help him manage all sorts of things, including how to prepare for battle, but ultimately have a single point of reference in terms of how he's managing the different superhero profiles, the different kinds of cities that the Avengers are protecting, villains, of course, the communication with S.H.I.E.L.D., all sorts of wonderful things that we're going to see in a few moments. So ultimately, in this particular use case, we're going to have a checklist, and it's going to have multiple rows that are indicating the different ways in which the Avengers need to prepare for a battle. Now, in terms of areas that they're going to be focusing on, and now we're putting a strategy hat on, we're going to have 5 areas. We're going to have intelligence, we're going to have planning, so this is general logistics. We are going to look at systems and equipment as well, because we need armor, right? And of course, security as well. This is very important because ultimately the Avengers are constantly threatened by both human and superhuman forces. So we are going to integrate this particular process as part of the general business process flow, which we will be using in this brand new solution we've developed for toning called the Avengers 365. Ultimately, this is a 360 view of anything to do with the Avengers battle endeavors to not only help them prep, but ultimately manage, as I mentioned, all of the superhero profiles, all of the innocents they're protecting, our cities, villains, Hydra, shenanigans, you name it. In terms of what we are going to be checking, so we're going to have different areas, so these 5 different areas, different kind of checks per area, but what are the data points that we're ultimately collecting? Well, first of all, we're going to have a very simple traffic light system in terms of past, so a very binary yes/no. Then we're going to look at a free text section to add comments, because imagine what happens if you want to communicate that you've not passed the check, for example. There's usually an action or a reason behind that. So you want to communicate that. And ultimately, when these requirements have been met as part of the action, you want to communicate that in return. Hence why we come into with a third field, which is going to be called action. Again, that traffic light system, yes, no, so that it's very easy for Tony or any of the Avengers that are going into the solution to understand if a check has been passed or if a specific action that has been noted as missing has been ultimately taken place. So now you have a single view of this kind of checklist points. And remember, we want this accessible, we want this easy to handle, because ultimately, Tony, just like many of our end users, do not have much time to spend in the system. He's there in the front line, battling all sorts of human and superhuman forces, and he just does not have the time to think about logistics and admin and all of that. So how do we help him? How do we make this system work harder? Let's talk about our data model very quickly, and I'm going to show you the system ultimately, but let's have a high-level view of what we're talking about. Obviously, there's a bigger data model that is underpinning the app, but let's focus on the entities that ultimately are bringing this to life in terms of this specific solution. So our main entity that will be hosting all of our data for prepping for battle is, as you may imagine, is going to be called Battle. And this is a custom table, but in Dynamics 365 sales terms, think of it as a version of the opportunity table. Now, we're not using a trial in the sense that this table has been repurposed, but think of it this way if you wanted a kind of relatable term for it. Now, what we've done on top is created 2 more custom tables. One is called Battle Checklist. Now, this is going to be a related entity so that we can host what will be the checklist in the form of a subgrid. So within that, we have already preempted that we're going to have an area, because we have 5 areas of checks, as we mentioned earlier. Of course, we're going to have an item. Each row will have a title / description. So, for example, what kind of specific check do we have for our equipment or for security and so forth. And then, as promised, the 3 data points we want to collect. So have we passed or not the check? Is there any comments we want to convey to our fellow Avengers? And ultimately, should there be a pending action, have we taken that into account and done that? Now, between these 2, there's going to be a one-to-many relationships, because sometimes you may want to convey multiple actions against the same battle, but no 2 battles will be alike in terms of the results. In terms of the third table that you're seeing there, the battle checklist template, this is some extra magic that we're going to add. So this is going to be a table that we are only touching in the beginning before we even think about the automation. This is our template for our data in terms of the standardized checks that we will be performing. So we should know, similar to other use cases, per row, the specific check that we are performing and the area it is in. And this is so we can automate the population of this in the subgrid. And you see how we're going to do it. But ultimately, think of your own use cases. How many times do you have a standardized piece of data that you don't want your end users to have an input on, but you do want either your super users or your product owners, key business stakeholders, whoever they may be, to have this, to be able to easily edit in the background with their own permission, but ultimately have this completely separate to the rest of your process, so it can still drive the automation, but it maintains that golden source of truth element. Now, what you see here is a little bit of a similarity. Ultimately, we have a synonym between the battle checklist and the battle checklist template table, between the columns of item, which is called now checklist item in the template table, and area is now called category. This has been done on purpose because the automation that we will create will lift and shift those data points through the automation and into the subgrid when we choose and say, this is the time, we are ready to prepare for battle, let's trigger the automation. Now, I understand that you may wonder, why didn't we give it the same name? I'm a big fan of data hygiene, and I'm a little bit OCD. So I wanted to give synonyms without the exact same names. It's not impossible to do that, but for not just my own peace of mind, I think it's great when it comes to governance and general admin if you have that uniqueness. Again, it's not a showstopper. It's a personal preference, and maybe I've been through so many scenarios where I'm looking at the metadata of an existing solution and thinking, why are we using the same name across tables? Wouldn't it be nicer to know exactly what we're looking at and have a unique element? Either way, this is the main elements of the data model we'll be focusing on. So, a little bit of a fun pun now. It's not easy being an Avenger, and it's definitely not easy battling all those alien and human sometimes forces out there. But you know what should be easy? Creating those checklists. We want them to be simple. We want them to be configurable for whoever will inherit this solution eventually. And we want them to be extendable in a way that ultimately is the most inclusive and the most useful for our end users. Now, the pun moment here is that I had the great pleasure a few months ago to visit the filming location for the Avengers training headquarters. So I couldn't resist taking a silly picture of that place. It did take about half an hour to have this flying pose. And of course, everyone who was around at the time thought I was a little bit silly / crazy, but that's okay. This is what happens when a geek is in a filming location. So hopefully at least some of you have felt the same. Right. So let's summarize our ingredients. We are going to have these 3 tables that we looked at in our data model, obviously bigger data model in the back end for the whole app to be supported, but these are the 3 tables that we're going to be focusing on. We're going to be using a subgrid, and we are going to dictate based on our design of the business process flow and our main form, as well as the automation at what point in time we will be triggering the automation and populating the subgrid with our template data. With that in mind, of course, Power Automate is going to do its magic, right? We're going to have a nice automated flow. The checklist template is ultimately a golden source of truth. We are separating that from the rest of the experience so that other super users or key business stakeholders can control and update that separately in due time. We'll send users to follow a standardized process. And what we're going to end up with is an instant editable table that is going to give us the opportunity either in Dynamics 365 or your model-driven app of choice, or Power Pages as well, to be edited in real time in a similar accessible format to the previous paper approaches. So I think it's time for a demo and take a peek under the hood. So I'm going to stop sharing this bit, and we are going to look at the demo environment. Now, I think it's good time that we all start praying a little bit, because of course we need our demo gods to be supporting us in this endeavor. So let's get right on it. Okay, so demo environment. So far, so good. I want to give you a little bit of a tour first of the app, and then we're going to go into the specifics of the solution. So this is Event365. This is a completely custom app. And as the name entails, we are helping the Avengers, not just Tony, but the whole of the Avengers, manage the manic world that is being superheroes and battling forces. What do we have here? Well, as we can see from our side map, there's a lot of cool data and processes that we'll be managing. So, for example, what we can see here is a portfolio of all the superheroes that we have on our roster. We have all sorts of data like our names, the city that they've been assigned to, their origin, the kind of skills that we are monitoring, whether they've been in touch with Inhumans, whether they are working on the training center and whatnot. There's all sorts of other data points that are pretty cool as well in terms of the cities that they're protecting, the Jarvis comms as well. So think of it as your activities table, but for your AI assistant. So in this case, Jarvis. Our key table is going to be battles that we're going to be looking at in just a moment, but there's all sorts of other cool things as well. So again, thinking of, for example, the sales processes here, we have shield leads, which are all the leads that we're getting in terms of new villains or new potential battles coming in from shield themselves. Of course, villains in terms of the ones that we are monitoring closely, and all sorts of other things to support the Avengers generally. So another cool thing is that this is based on most of the Avengers movies. So there's real data flowing through in the sense that it's as realistic and close to the movies as possible. So hopefully there's fellow geeks out there that are appreciating the depth of the rabbit hole. Either way, battles. So here we have the portfolio of the active battles that the Avengers are engaged in. There's quite a few things that are happening. We have the different battles. We have a key view here in terms of understanding very quickly the kind of battle that we're dealing with in terms of time, in terms of who is leading the forces, who are we protecting in terms of the city that it's taking place in. There's some financials involved because naturally there's armor that needs to be purchased for security and equipment purposes and so forth. So let me give you a tour of the solution and then we'll start unpicking it. So here, for example, we have a battle in Hong Kong. And what we see here is a lovely business process flow customized with its own nice theme. So we have a few different phases here for starting up the battle planning and all sorts of cool things in the main form. But ultimately, we want to focus our attention on the battle checklist. So the key here is that we have, to begin with, a toggle. So this prepare for battle toggle, when switched to no, is completely innocent, does nothing, and the subgrid below for the battle checklist is going to be empty. But when we are ready to start preparing for battle, this is when we switch it to yes, and this is when our automation will kick in to auto-populate the first two columns on the left called item and area in our subgrid to create this instant editable checklist we want all of our Avengers to have access to. There is column security in this particular toggle so that we are limiting who can ultimately trigger this automation. You may wonder, why is that? So in this particular scenario, we want Tony and only the senior Avengers to be able to initiate the planning, but we still want other Avengers to contribute when it comes to the checklist themselves. And similarly, we want this kind of security to follow through with other kinds of profiles. So It may be that also in your use case, you want to have that implemented, or you may want it accessible to all your users. Either way, this is how it's going to look. As we can see, everything is instantly accessible and editable. And we have the option for past. This is actually a choice column. We have the option to mark it as yes or no, but by default, we want it blank so that the automation can carry those blank values rather than having a two options column, a yes/no column, essentially, that will limit us from having those blank values by default so we can start fresh. Generally, I have a preference for choice columns versus yes/no because it does give you the option of starting with blank by default and gives you more flexibility in terms of, let's say, your stakeholders changing their mind down the line and going from 2 to 3 or 4 options and so forth. But either way, this is how this has been set up. You'll see the same setup for the action column. And ultimately, comments is just a simple text field that we want to be adding our commentary when it comes to performing this checklist. Of course, we are completely able to open up this line and have this amended within it too, but each to their own. Okay, so we've seen how this will work, but we want to also see how we've contributed, how we've configured it in the background. And then, of course, the piece of resistance, we'll see it in real time as well. But I just wanted to show you the end result so that we can unpick it in retrospect. Okay, so we mentioned the template table to begin with. So the pattern checklist table, template table, apologies, will hold our templated data. Again, this is super useful if you're isolating that. You're giving the opportunity to control this separately and to ultimately drive the automation. If at any point the business or whoever kind of deciding user needs to change this, we can have separate permissions and ultimately control this as needed. But no magic other than that. It's mainly these two columns. The next bit is, where are we hosting the subgrid? So the related table here is battle checklist. And we did talk about the different columns that will exist. Of course, our checklist item and our area will be there, but then the 3 data points we discussed around past, action, and comments. And then, of course, the ultimate destination is the battle table. This is where we're hosting everything. This is what we have configured in terms of the business process flow, the beautiful main form that we saw earlier, all these good things. So let's start looking at the flow. I think we're all now having itchy to look at the flow. So let's unpick it. And I did promise earlier today that what we're going to see here is not just content that you've either seen in a different session or in my blog. I wanted to bring you new content as well. So for today's new content addition to the general piece that we're going to look at is how to optimize our flow and how to optimize specifically the fetch XML query that is going to do some of the magic. And I want to give a big shout out to Yannick Rickmans because he gave me a good, healthy challenge to look at how to optimize the flow and really push myself, because ultimately this is a very specific scenario. We're working with a small database. Ultimately, performance won't be impacted, but we need to think about those bigger databases. We need to go deeper into how this will scale or fail when it comes to enterprises. So ultimately, we're going to look at some of those cool nuggets here today. Right, so let's get things started with our trigger. What do we have here? We have the classic Dataverse trigger around when a row is added, modified, or deleted. In particular, we're going to go with modified because we're just looking at that toggle, that prepare for battle toggle, and when it turns to yes. So when it has a true value, because this is a Boolean. So we're going to go for change time modify, perfectly fine. Table name, this is battles in its plural name. because ultimately this is where the toggle is hosted. Then in this particular case, I have scope as organization, but this is because it's a very simple use case within a demo. However, I do urge you to look at your security model and amend this accordingly. And now, when we do this check of the toggle being true, is in filter rows. So this is where we added the expression to say, check for the toggle, which has a logical name or AP_prepare for battle. That is true, or not equals false. Either way, it's the same thing. And this is how we're going to run this automation only when our toggle is switched to yes and saved. Then, what we're going to do, instead of trigger the automation straight away, which is the enhancement from the first version of this solution, where we were triggering the automation straight away, is that we are going to add a check. And we're going to start by saying that we want to check if the subgrid that is hosted through the battle checklist table already has records in it. So what we're saying is there child records for that particular parent battle record? Or in other words, is there already a line item in our subgrid? Now this is important because if we want to have unique rows, and we don't want to trigger this again and again, which could happen either because our users are getting confused, or either way they have permissions to the system, even through our column security. We don't necessarily want to trigger this again and unnecessarily spam the database with data, but also run this flow. So the way to start this check is by performing a list rows action to say, tell me if there's related child records already. So of course, the table name is battle checklist, again, a plural name, and the magic happens within our fetch XML query. Now this point, it all depends on your preferences and your familiarity or comfort levels with fetch XML. There's loads of options. Of course, you can write it yourself by all means, but there's other options as well. So to begin with, either in the old or new UI, Advanced Find has loads of options because you essentially can configure your filters and then you can download your fetch XML and copy and paste it there. Of course, we have the much loved tool from XRM Toolbox, which is the Fetch XML Builder, a great tool there as well. And I'm sure there's other opportunities to do it. What I do want to say though is that what you do get as a result sometimes is it is the correct query, but there's ways to optimize it so you're not performing unnecessary actions within it that will delay the performance and the flow, obviously, ultimately. But sometimes may crash it as well, depending on how big this database is. So for example, if instead of 10 rows, our automation should populate, loads more, then this may crash as well. So we don't want that. So we're going to take, if we've taken the query from a tool or any kind of hack that you have, and remember 3 points that I want to flag. So by default, within the fetch XML query that you have downloaded, you're going to get the distinct false, distinct equals brackets false in the fetch node. You'll see it at the end, but you'll see that I don't have it here. Now, 2 reasons for that. Number 1, if you don't have a real use for it, it's not going to break the back. It's not going to change anything. What this does essentially, it is a check, a general check, and then false versus true makes the ultimate check. It's a check of whether you're looking at distinct or duplicate values. By default, distinct equals false already applies whether you write it or not. So again, it's not going to make a difference. But if you're also not caring for duplicate values and you're happy to get them as part of your query, then why try to perform this? The second optimization point that I want to make is that in this use case, and hopefully in some of yours as well, we are only looking for at least one child record. Ultimately, this automation is very binary. It's either going to trigger the whole 10 rows or nothing. So ultimately, even getting one row back means that we have a child record, the automation has triggered, and thus we don't want to do it again. So what we're saying here in our fetch node is that just give me the top one, which means that we're not going to run it multiple times. And the third thing that I want to suggest is that as you're looking through the populate fetch XML query, there's a few other ways to optimize. So for example, if it's retrieving attributes, but this is not doing anything within your ultimate result, you can just remove them. Also, when you're looking at other parts of how it's been configured, let's say there's an ordering line there. Again, if you don't have any use for it ultimately in this flow, remove it as well. It's just, in this particular case, you might not be saving massive amounts of time. We're talking about milliseconds, but it will make a difference in a big database. So ultimately, what this fetch XML query is doing is that it's trying to match the foreign key of one of the tables with the primary key of the other one to say, is this battle record found with a child entity within the battle checklist, which is what the key matching does. Because this is a lookup because of the relationship. So the battle lookup, if it's been populated without battle record, then we know, there is a line record, the relationship exists, we don't want to trigger this again. Now that we've performed this listing, we want to check what outcome we've had. Have we gotten any results back or not? So what we're going to do here is we have this expression here. It's a very cool expression. And essentially, it's saying, is this output empty or not? So let's unpick this a little bit. So we're performing this empty expression. We are looking at the output of the list rows action. So this is where it's named here. And obviously, if you want to rename retrospectively your action because you want to have this nice data hygiene, make sure to do this as well. Otherwise, you're going to have errors. And then ultimately, as we finish up this expression, we're saying, okay, we've taken the outputs. Now show me the money, essentially. We are going to say it's equal to true. So are we saying that this is empty, which is our happy path, right? We don't want to have any line items so that we trigger the automation. So if the happy path exists, this is the yes branch because this is a condition action. So this is a condition. And what we're going to do is in the yes branch, we're going to start again with the list rows and take our rows from the battle checklist template. Remember that templated data with the 2 columns. And then we're going to perform and apply to each, which essentially is going to match the battle checklist template with its synonym columns in the battle checklist subgrid. So obviously we're going to take the value through the dynamic content, and then we're going to start our matching. So the destination is the battle checklist because this is where the subgrid is. We're taking our synonym column, so area will be coming from the category column, item will be coming from the checklist item, and then we have to make sure that we're mapping our battle as well. So just remember that you're not just taking from the dynamic content the table, but you need to mention the logical name as well with the /. Of course, this is a happy path where we're saying there is no relationship already, there is no child records. However, if we do find there is a relationship, because let's say someone has gone back and forth with that toggle, but the data is there, then we're going to go down the if no branch. And for that, we're going to have a very simple terminate action. And this helps us in terms of looking at the flow runs and ultimately confirming that this has run successfully, but it did find data and thus did not populate anything further. So having that terminate action in the status of cancel is super helpful because of how you'll be monitoring your flow and making sure that it's running appropriately at all times. So this is the essence of the specific flow that we are working on. So why don't we see it in action? Right, so let's take, if I remember correctly, this is a specific battle that did not have a battle checklist generated yet. Okay, so some more prayers, please, because this is not going to be the real life demo. Okay, so we are now at a position to change, because you see, we're at the develop battle plan stage. We are ready to see the magic. So we're going to switch this to yes. Of course, we're going to have to save it. It's going to do its magic. So there's a few things now. So we can either wait it out, or we're just going to go even more hardcore and refresh it. Sometimes it does take a few seconds. So you see it in full action. Apologies for the few refreshes, but there we go. Ultimately, we have now generated the 10 rows that we were expecting. So our template data has now entered the building, and we have the opportunity to instantly enjoy our checklist for consumption. We can at any point go through the checks, and this is in a way that is very accessible. We can go through line by line, or however the checks are meant to happen. And this is giving the opportunity to the user to navigate this in a very accessible way compared to their old ways on paper. Now, what I do want to mention here is that there has been a little bit of magic when it comes to the subgrid itself. Now, the tool that has been used for that is Ribbon Workbench. And what we've done essentially, as you may see here, is that we have removed, in fact, we've hidden the control for adding a new item. And the reason that we've done that is because we do not want the users to have that control. We want the automation to drive it. And this is very good when you are wanting to control the way that your users are inputting data, because ultimately data is the lifeblood of every CRM app. And it's very important that you maintain this source of truth. But if you're still happy for your users to add them manually as extras on top of the automation, then you don't have to worry about that. But generally, Ribbon Workbench is a fantastic tool to work on this kind of things on top of what is available out of the box, and be a lot more creative with your configuration. However, we did say we're going to mention Power Pages, so let's do a quick whiz through of that. So actually, let's start with, before we even go there, I want to show you the site before we look at the automation. I should have logged in, but anyway, so we are first looking at the Power Pages Design Studio. This is where we designed our website, which is Shield Declassified. And this is a particular website that we have for supporting Shield agents that want to help the Avengers go into battle. So this is our version of end users. They're not going to have access to the CRM app and all of the different data. We want them to have access to a very specific part of the data and the process, which is the active support of battles. And this is why we have this portal. Now, this portal is lovely because it has other opportunities for the agents. We can look at onboarding. We can look at a general kind of repository for all the mission statements and all the different debriefs that people like inspectors or chief directors within Shield want to communicate. So it's a great kind of portal to have. Let me show you around a little bit before we look through the automation. So we are logged in as Maria Hill, who is one of the top agents here in Shield. We have some lovely iframes here with some of the debriefs from the agency. We have all sorts of content, as I mentioned, around onboarding the agents, help them to understand their role within Shield, but ultimately the money is within the active battle support. So this is where we are giving them the subgrid that we saw previously in Dynamics in the Power Pages format. In case you're wondering how to build this, feel free to refer to my blog. I have a step-by-step approach on how to set up complex forms and views within Power Pages that are imitating that great out-of-the-box model-driven app behavior that we know and love, because this is requiring all sorts of magic within Power Pages management between multi-step forms, basic forms, lists, web pages, you name it, all sorts of great stuff. But ultimately, what we are seeing here is the subgrid that is hosting this battle data. And then as we open it up, we'll see the subgrid that hosts the battle checklist data. But here we see our battles to begin with. So the shield agent, I have the ability to either view details for past battles. As we see, this is inactive, so it's driven by that. And I can very easily just read the data. Or if it's a current battle, then I can look at editing as well. And this is the opportunity that we get with this permissioning. So what I wanted to show you is within this battle checklist, how this looks. So here we go. This is from the one of the battle records. And now that we've opened up our multi-step form, we are seeing the subgrid in its Power Pages version. And we have different kinds of columns and lines. As promised, is exactly the same. And then as we go into each row, and we are ready to support as a shield agent from the front line, we can update accordingly. So how it will look like essentially is that we'll have obviously some of the pre-populated data. We already know the battle that we're in and the item in the area. This is coming from the automation. And then we can update the data points that we're collecting. So has this been a successful check? Yes or no? The comments are free text field, as we know. And finally, if there's any pending action through the comments that we've communicated to fellow Avengers of shield agents, then we can communicate as well if this has passed or not, and then click submit to go back to the subgrid experience and continue on to the next check. So this is how you can see that end-to-end view. As I did promise, there is steps for all of this fully explained. Just as a quick view, this is the blog. So you have all sorts of articles, particularly for the checks to make sure there's no pattern records. That's the latest blog. And this is this one here, where I explain step by step what we just discussed. And then the original blog where it describes the automation itself in its full glory. This is the earlier February blog, and you can see again what we've covered even in more detail so that you can set this up yourself and in your own use case as well. So let me quickly go back in the interest of time to the main slides. And share that 1 moment. There we go. So I wanted to summarize the tips for the automation and running those fetch XML queries. So limit the number of the records you're returning by saying, let's say I want the top 1 or top 10, whatever you need. In this use case, 1 was more than enough because we are identifying already that automation has run, as this is the only way to get data into the subgrid. The second part is the distinct equals false section of your fetch node does not really need it if you're not caring about the whole distinct versus duplicate record scenario. And finally, minimize the attributes that you're retrieving if, again, this is not serving any purpose. So to leave some time, let me thank you for joining us today. I definitely look forward to hearing from you. You have a link to QR code here on the left. And if you scan this, you'll find all of my socials that we can connect on. Then I also have 2 separate QR codes for you. This is the 2 blog posts that I mentioned, the main checklist setup, and then the extra logic for checking how parent records, the parent does not have any child records related to it, which is a nice thing for you to add in various automations that you find using, whether it's the checklist or something else as well. And thank you so very much. Let's see if we have Mohsen. Let me know if there's any particular comments that we want to address.
Awesome. It's a very great session. Thank you again. And actually, guys, if you have any question, you can ask your question in the chat. But in the chat, I see some person thanks from you about the great session. I will show in the slide amazing session. This is such a useful pattern, MTA. I like the structure of your presentation or funny of the presentation. It's very great. It was very great. Yeah. I think there is no question. Guys, if you have any question, you can ask from in the chat. Great demo, so informative. Okay. Yeah. Actually, as you know, as Angeliki mentioned, if you have any question, you can connect from LinkedIn or other social media, ask your question, and we can down the end of this live session. Thank you, Angeliki, for amazing session. Yeah, thank you. This is a Angeliki post in the website, and I will share in the screen, maybe recorded session on the YouTube. Other guys can see this link. Yeah. Thank you, Angeliki. Thank you very much again.
My absolute pleasure. It was great to be with you all.
Yeah. Bye, guys.